My golden child cousin borrowed $15,000 from me to start a business but spent it traveling and gambling. I took him to court and my whole family sided with him. My cousin recently came to me asking to borrow $7,000 for a business investment. He already owed me $3,000, so at first I said no, but my parents forcefully pressured me into giving in. My cousin promised to have it back to me within 6 months, as he'd have his business up and running by then. However, 6 months passed, and not only had he not even started his business yet, but he had actually spent the $7,000 on himself. He went traveling in Asia, bought a new gaming console and gambled the rest away. I remember the day he came to me about it. His parents and mine were with him. Apparently, he felt awful for how reckless he was with the $7,000 and wanted to make things right. In order to do this, he asked for another loan of $5,000, swearing that this time he'd actually start a business. I straight up laughed at him, but as I was in the middle of telling him no, my aunt interrupted me. She screamed that family helps each other out and started relentlessly pushing me into giving him the money. The memories of being ganged up on like this resurfaced, and as my parents, my aunt, my uncle, and my brother all towered over me, talking about lending him the money, I essentially let them bully me into giving Derek another $7,000. As the months went on, Derek, of course, never paid me back. I gave him another 6 months, and after that, I started pressing him about the now total $15,000 he owed me. Of course, my family defended him, saying I was overreacting and needed to give him time. This was, unfortunately, no surprise. Growing up, the difference between Derek and me was obvious. I remember being 16 and working long hours at a diner to save for my first car. I took every extra shift I could, while Derek didn't have to work at all. On his 16th birthday, our family threw him a big party and gave him a brand new car with a huge red bow on top. It wasn't just the car that bothered me. It was how the family treated him. They acted like Derek deserved the world, while no one seemed to notice how hard I worked. When I finally saved enough to buy a used car, there was no celebration. Felt like my effort didn't matter. One Thanksgiving, Derek casually mentioned crashing his car while racing with friends. Instead of being upset, my family laughed and brushed it off. My uncle even wrote him a check to cover the repairs. If that had been me, I'd have been grounded for months. It was always like that. When Derek struggled in school, they hired tutors and blamed the teachers. When I had trouble, I was told to figure it out on my own. Derek got everything handed to him, while I had to work for everything I had. The family saw him as special, while I was just expected to manage on my own. My mom told me to be patient. Derek has always come through for the family, and he'll come through for you too. Sure, Derek had helped family members before. He'd paid off my aunt's overdue credit card bill once, and even covered my cousin's rent when she lost her job. Everyone loved to remind me of that, as if those small favors made him some sort of hero. But what they conveniently forgot was that Derek never had to worry about his own bills. My uncle had always handled his car payments. My aunt paid his credit card debt when it got too high. His college tuition, fully covered. He never had the stress of budgeting, of choosing between paying the electric bill or the rent. Of course, he could come through when he didn't have real responsibilities weighing him down. Derek would swoop in and throw a few $100s at someone now and then, but no one had ever given him anything like the $15,000 I had. That was a whole different story. He was always the one offering help, not the one owing it. No one had ever asked him for anything this big. And now that I had, he couldn't handle it. Then came the confrontation. I gathered up the family and asked Derek for the money in front of everyone. I looked around the room for some form of support, but all I got were blank stares. My father gave me a shrug. Derek, on the other hand, just sat there looking smug, his hands folded in front of him like he had nothing to answer for. The aunt that he paid the credit card for broke the silence and said that I was overreacting and that family isn't just about money. She said I was causing a rift over something trivial and that we'd all miss each other if one of us had died. She loved pulling the "if I were dead" card. But this wasn't about that. I needed my money, and she treated it as if it were spare change. I said that Derek promised to pay it back, and it's been 6 months with nothing but excuses. Derek leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and told me that the money was tied up. He said the same thing that he'd been telling me for months. As soon as the deal goes through, I'll get it back with interest. He asked me to trust him. I did trust him, but every time I asked for an update, he had another excuse. Meanwhile, he was out here living his best life, while I was sitting here wondering if I'd ever see that money again. Before Derek could respond, my uncle finally spoke up. He told me that he was disappointed to see us act like this. He said that Derek was doing something good for the future of the family and that in a couple of years, $15,000 would mean nothing when we have millions. He told me that I should be proud that I helped Derek out early on. I felt my stomach drop. I told him it was fine and left it there. I knew I was only wasting my time talking to them. I realized that my family wasn't going to help me, so I took matters into my own hands. I collected evidence of Derek's spending habits. I knew Derek was spending the money on luxurious things, and while his Instagram posts were public, I needed more. I needed solid proof. So I started digging. I tracked his purchases, followed up on his so-called business investments, and what I found confirmed my suspicions. There was no business. Derek had used my $15,000 to buy a luxury car, take a couple of extravagant vacations, and furnish his new apartment with high-end furniture. The tech startup he had claimed to be investing in didn't even exist. With this information, I consulted a lawyer and filed a lawsuit against Derek for fraud. My family was furious. They didn't care about the money anymore. To them, I was the one destroying the family. But I wasn't backing down. The court proceedings dragged on for months. Derek's lawyer tried to paint me as unreasonable, but the evidence spoke for itself. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Derek was ordered to repay the full amount, plus interest, and was fined for his fraudulent actions. But the truth is, my relationship with my family was forever changed. They apologized, of course, once the ruling came down, but their apologies felt hollow. They had chosen Derek over me when it mattered, and that was something I could never forget.